All right. So it's been a while since I've had a podcast recording in 2023. I did take a 3-month hiatus, and I'm really excited to welcome Tilly Tanga. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Christine.
All right. So I guess we can go right into it. Do you mind providing a short introduction about yourself, background, interests, and hobbies?
Sure, yeah. So like you said, my name's Tilly. I am originally Italian. My whole family still lives in Italy. Actually very recently became an American citizen, which was a very exciting, development in my life. Background, I graduated from college and went straight into healthcare. Really liked healthcare, ended up migrating towards the like business operational side of healthcare. So for a couple of years, I was doing clinical ops and like financial op consulting for a healthcare medical group in the Washington, D.C. area. And then during the pandemic, I was like, oh, I actually really like business stuff. I really like how like dynamic it is and how your workload really changes from day to day. And was having a conversation with one of my friends from college who had encountered, you know, issue with his family asking him for loans. And we were like, well, why don't we just, start a company? We looked online and saw that there was no real system in place that facilitated loans between friends and family, like giving managerial support, documentation, providing distribution between payment platforms, stuff like that. And we were like, there's a pandemic, we have nothing else to do. Our work is only requiring so much of us in the day-to-day. So we were like, let's just do it. And so, yeah, now I'm doing that based out of Washington, D.C.
That's so cool. So what ended up, so it sounded like it kind of fell onto your lap as opposed to like, I'm going to do fintech. You were just thinking about a problem and you ended up being in fintech from that.
Yeah, it really came out of a conversation. And it was mostly, again, like, so what happened is that my uh, old co-founder, his mother had asked him for a loan,
Mm.
and I had previously done a bunch of different loans with my sisters, so I knew the intricacies of what like the contract would look like and stuff like that. So it really came out of that conversation about how there really should be a system in place to help people manage that a little bit better.
Mhm. Yeah, well, honestly, when I was looking into Pigeon, I was like, seriously, this hasn't been here yet. I can't believe that we finally have a solution. So, I have so many instances in my own situations as well that like, this would have really helped. Like, why didn't we have this before?
Yeah, well, that happens all the time. People
Yeah.
always like, oh, I made a loan with whoever like 2 years ago. This would have been so helpful back then. And
Mhm.
we're like, yeah, well, we just started. So going forward, you can use us.
Mhm. So, a little icebreaker I usually like to ask all my guests is if you had all the time in the world, what would you be doing?
Ooh, uh, I don't know really what all of your other guests say, Christine, but this is a really difficult question for me to answer because I am like addicted to hobbies and starting all sorts of different hobbies. I don't think if I had all the time in the world, I don't think it would be career or work related. I think it would probably be a combination of like going on some adventure in the Arctic on like a big expedition and like doing some pottery out there and maybe some like metal working or like something with my hands in some really bizarre place in the middle of nature is I think my go-to answer.
That's nice. What are you into right now?
Oh, I'm doing a lot of pottery right now. It's not in the Arctic or on like some crazy mountain. It's just in a studio in Washington, D.C. But that's fine. I'm doing a lot of that. I've really decided recently to also get into foraging. So I'm going around, looking for mushrooms and things that I can eat. I'm not particularly good at it, and I haven't done it all that much, but it's really fun.
That's actually pretty cool. I'm always so scared of like, what if I'm picking up something toxic or even
Yeah,
bad?
yeah. There's a society near here that you can based out of DC, you can send them pictures of things that you find and they'll be like, it will kill you or it will not kill you. So that's helpful.
That's really good for survivorship.
Yeah, exactly.
So I saw that you're director of operations at Pigeon. How has that been? How did you get, I mean, I think you told us about how you got into it, but how was that transition, I guess, leaving from your healthcare role into this?
Yeah, it was a little bit of an interesting transition. So I helped co-found the company really early on. I will say that like about a year in or so, I essentially realized that I really like the like operational, like the setting up procedures. I really like being on the back end of company business work. I did not particularly enjoy working with investors or doing all of that upfront stuff. So I took a little bit of a step back from the like official co-founder position to step into the director of operations. And once I did that, I don't know, my day-to-day just got so much better. I was like, I can just focus on like researching different like employee policies and putting together handbooks and like setting up our 401k and deciding like pricing points for like stuff like that, as opposed to like having to write like investor updates because that didn't speak to me as much. And I just find that as soon as I essentially started structuring my job within the company or my role within the company to be something that like gave me joy on a day-to-day basis, the transition was like delightful.
Yeah, I always was very fascinated over entrepreneurship and particularly just the operational side, like the actual business, not the finance, not the investments. Like I didn't want to deal with that. So I guess in the future, I'd probably outsource that to another co-founder. But I definitely can relate to you because that's like the meat of the business. It's like getting your hands dirty with everything.
Right. And it's so dynamic. It really, because it's such a small team, it's like you really become a jack of all trades. And one day I'm like putting together like marketing stuff on Canva, and then the next day I'm like helping file all of our taxes, and then which actually I'm doing right now. But it's just like it changes so much from day to day, and very similar to how like I have a whole series of hobbies. I think I get bored very easily with one thing that I'm doing over and over again. So I think it just fits really well to be a jack of all trades.
Amazing. So can you tell us a little bit about Pigeon? You talked about it a little bit, but a little bit more about like what are the offerings? What are you guys up to right now?
Yeah. So essentially, again, based off of the problem, Pigeon facilitates interpersonal loans between friends and family. So say like your brother, assuming you might have a brother, asks you for a loan to like get their first car is a really big one that we get. You guys would both come to the platform and we can move the money between you. So we would move over the principal and then do all of the repayments through the platform. And then there's a bunch of different features that people can pick, which essentially just make the management of the loan really easy. So people can opt into getting a contract, documentation of everything. People can opt into like getting like automatic reminders set up. People can opt into like what type of interest rate they want to charge, things like that. And right now the company is very much in like a growing phase. We've got a couple of different side projects that we're working on that I think we'll be hoping to release fairly soon. But essentially, we're really just trying to grow anything that relates to mixing money and relationship, because those are two things that we live on, right? Like we rely so heavily on money on a day-to-day basis, and we rely so heavily on relationships on a day-to-day basis, and yet there's so much stigma related to combining those two things. So we're working in the direction of trying to like essentially take over that space, anything that intertwines the two.
Yeah, and I think honestly having a platform is so important because if you, let's say, have a loan with your brother and then you write it on a napkin and you're like, okay, we're gonna do this. Now, all of a sudden you're gonna have tensions at the dinner table if you don't pay, but having a system is like, well, it's there.
Exactly. It's like project managing it. Yeah, that's right. And then you avoid all those like uncomfortable Thanksgiving calls where they're like, hey, like, nice to see you, happy Thanksgiving, by the way, what's happened to my $5,000, you know? And yeah, we've had loads of people who've told us that they would need it on a day-to-day basis, which is just really exciting. So just working on growing that, really.
Mhm. And I'm actually really curious about the monetization strategy. Is it kind of like at the beginning of the loan? Is that where I get this in this case, Pigeon would get your money, or is it like a monthly basis for every single payment? Like, how does that exactly work?
Yeah, so we've got a little bit of a combination of things going on. Pigeon is free to use if for like smaller sized loans that we have. We've very recently actually launched premium loans, which are a subscription-based loan, which offer additional resources, and those are loans larger than a principal of $2,000. And that's just because once you're starting talking larger amounts of money, people want additional resources because they care more about like getting paid back, and the borrower might need the money more for like a down payment on a house or something. So we do have that subscription model. And then we also work with partners like referrals and affiliates. We have quite a large like educational hub that we use. And so we work with partners and referrals and affiliates in that as well.
That's great. And actually, something that is very interesting. So, I'm a homeowner, I have a mortgage, and naturally, of course, it does affect your credit score. So, does this actually affect your credit score if, let's say, you're late on your personal loans?
It does not affect your credit score.
Oh, I mean, not to encourage people not to pay your loans, but I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, we had the chance. I mean, we like have gone back and forth a couple of times about whether or not we want to report to credit bureaus. The thing that we really wanted to maintain was that credit can be a really big access issue.
Yeah.
For people, and a lot of the borrowers that are coming to our platform are coming because they can't access a like good personal loan somewhere else with good rates, for example. So we wanted to try and stay clear of that purposefully, and I'm really glad you picked up on that, Christine, because it's something that we really care about, to be sure that we're not reporting to credit bureaus or having that impact your credit score at all. Things happen.
I love that. I love that. So I guess in the future, what are you planning on, or what is Pigeon specifically thinking about doing? Are you planning on just sticking to interpersonal relations, or maybe even branching out to small banks or in the future?
We've got all sorts of things in the funnel going on. There are a couple of things. I don't know how many of them I can disclose at this point, but it is essentially anything that is targeting the interpersonal loan space, interpersonal money exchange space. So think about like, inheritance or like trusts or anything like that is something that we might look forward to in the future, just because that it has like inter-family dynamics, interpersonal dynamics, and involves moving money back and forth. So
great. We'll definitely have to keep updated on that then. So what did you think about the future of the fintech industry? What do you think is up and coming? Or do you think that something like this, like I would peer-to-peer loan, I guess, if this is what that category would be, what would be the future of that?
Yeah. So the future of the fintech space a little bit difficult now. I mean, the future of tech right now current tech is having a little bit of a hard time. Fintech is having a little bit of a hard time. Specifically as it relates to Pigeon, we've gone back and forth and we've got a couple of different hypotheses going. Pigeon, I would say, is like a fintech company, but also does not operate within the traditional like banking industry, right? So all this talk of like a recession and people's inflation going up and people's finances having a really hard time, I think is probably going to lead people to use a company like Pigeon more because they're turning away from traditional banking institutions. But yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with all of the bigger tech companies. And like everything seems to be will probably bounce back at some point. I think there's probably going to be another couple of years of increased hardships. I'm hoping Pigeon can help people out throughout that. And I'm hoping that all the other companies can do well as well, you know?
Yeah, I think it's honestly perfect timing that we're doing this podcast recording, because I think Pigeon more than ever, I can see a lot of use cases around this time of year.
Yeah. And, you know, we just want people to be able to handle their like medical emergencies or whatever it is that they have. So hoping the best for society, really.
So moving forward onto your career. So how did your experiences, I guess, lead to where you are today? How did that translate into your professional experience and career?
Okay, so I speaking from like a personal experience side, I you know, grew up in Europe. I bounced around a lot. So I lived in like 5 different countries growing up before I made it to America. Eventually landed in America, which is where all of the tech stuff is happening, which is very exciting. But I had a really hard time, I think, picking something that I'm interested in and something that I want to do and something that makes me happy. I've always struggled a little bit with, you know, not being a people pleaser as much and trying to focus on like my own choices. And I think I felt that very strongly getting out of university. Up until university, I was, you know, on a path going somewhere. And then was kind of just thrown out into the world. The pandemic happened. I decided to do a lot of work on my mental health. Both my parents passed away when I was 13. So I had a lot of really complicated thoughts and beliefs and emotions around trying to be a particular way so that society would care about me and people would care about me, and you know, trying to pick one thing that made me actually happy. And taking the leap of quitting my job, for example, was something that was really stressful because not necessarily associated with a high level of success, anything like that. So did a lot of therapy over the past like 3 years or so. Essentially was like, I just got to focus on what makes me happy on a day-to-day basis, as opposed to trying to achieve some ultimate status in life. And that's when I quit my job, and I decided to not interact with investors anymore because I thought really critically about it. And I was like, I don't really like doing this. And decided to, just essentially try and take my career as a journey and bubble it down to the day-to-day and what it is that I can and want to do today. I write myself a list every morning of a couple of things that'll make me really happy, a couple of things that I unfortunately have to do, like life admin. Like I have to move my car because there's always street cleaning going on and they always give me mountains of tickets otherwise. And trying to like bubble it down to the day-to-day without trying to think about how to achieve ultimate success in my career has been quite a big journey that I took.
That's great. So on that note, what is something that it's non-negotiable, you do every single day to make sure you start the day strong?
I make a coffee. I go for a walk outside while I drink my coffee, and I listen to a podcast because, like, Christine, I love podcasts. You don't understand how excited I am to be here.
Aww.
So I have a coffee, I go for a walk, I listen to a podcast every day.
So if it's raining, snowing, you'd still go on that walk?
Yeah.
Wow.
Maybe not if it's hailing. It hasn't hailed here yet. So maybe not if it's hailing, but rain, snow. If for whatever reason I can't manage to get out there in the morning, I do it at lunchtime or in the afternoon or at some other point. But getting outside while the sun is out is really important.
That's a great habit, especially when a lot of people just work from home or they just work and they just forget to get some fresh air.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What do you do, Christine?
I don't have anything like that. I wish I do, but I do like cat sitting on the side, so that's really my walking outside to just go to someone's house and take care of their cats. But I wish I had more discipline.
Oh, you should go for a walk. It's really nice. We're on a walk together at some point.
So I guess when you said you co-founded the company,
Mhm.
and I'm actually curious if you had exposure to this side since you moved into the operational side, but
Yeah.
how was it like taking it off the ground? Was it just you and your co-founder, or
Mhm.
did you have a small team? Especially something as complex like this, I feel like there was a lot of work to make sure it was okay to launch.
Yeah, no, it was just him and I. He's technical, so he like put his head down and just coded like a madman. We got it out in the span of, I think it was 4 months. Like it was a really quick turnaround. From we decided we were going to do this in it was 4 months. And then I was doing everything else more or less, and then we'd have like larger ongoing conversations about how we want to like make money, or what our pricing policy should be like, and what we want the mission of the company to be, and what we want it to look like in like 5 years, and how to best set it up now to achieve that. But yeah, I was doing filing all of the paperwork, which was a massive headache, and trying to figure out all of those logistics that you might not think about, like you have to have an address, but you can't have a fintech company that's based out of someone's home. So then we had to get a USPS box. It's like all of these different logistics I was doing. We did work very closely with a group of like consulting lawyers, or like a very small legal team, just to make sure that we weren't breaking any like state laws. It was very confusing, at least to me, if you have people who are doing loans with each other's across state, which jurisdiction that falls in, stuff like that. So they were really helpful, but the rest of it was just, heads down, trying to get it all out. And then we launched it I think August 1st, 2020. And I was somewhere in New York State by some lake, and I like got into this like Airbnb, and I didn't see anyone for a week, and just released it. And the high we got after all of those months working on it was absolutely insane. So yeah, it was a lot of work, but it's fun, and it's wonderful to see how it's grown now. I mean, now we've got actual employees and a 401k and benefits, and like it's a real living, breathing thing. And if we're not around anymore, it's still going to exist, which is just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, that's actually something that I was always curious about. It's like if you did Uber for the first time, there's all these new things that you don't even know what to be considerate of. So I was like, how did you find out about like these laws you have to be considerate of, like the credit bureau, or like even finding out what to be aware of when you're in a
Yeah,
new space like this?
yeah. We did have some really helpful mentors that we found. There were a couple of companies that are very similar that had cropped up in like the 80s. So we talked to their co-founders, and they gave us a heaps of advice. Talking to people was really helpful. And then a lot of it was just learn as you go. A lot of it was trial and error, where we'd be like, oh, like, what was it? We used to have lots of puns all over that were pigeon related. And we used to call everyone who used pigeon squeakers, because that's a baby pigeon. And then we got feedback from a customer, and they were like, we absolutely hate that you call us squeakers. It's so demeaning. Like, it makes me feel so badly about myself on a day-to-day basis. And we were like, oh, well, never mind. Let's backtrack that. Which is a minor example, but it's a lot of just like trial and error.
What was, I guess, on a similar note, what was a mistake or a hurdle you guys had that you had to go over?
Um, uh, well, this is an unexpected challenge. I didn't expect there to be such um large amounts of like hackers or fraud when we first launched. Which now we've put in all sorts of restrictions to make sure that doesn't happen. We're like, manually verifying people if they hit a certain sketch level. We've got all sorts of background restrictions going on, but we didn't in the early days. And so we had all sorts of people who would come and like find someone's like credit card information on the deep web and start stealing all their money. And it was like all like real headaches that were really unexpected. And that was like a big conversation of like, how do we put structures in place to prevent this moving forward? And then how do we handle these people now who are really upset? And hopefully how do we make sure that like no laws get broken, which they weren't on our part, which was great. But that was really unexpected. And I was also like, I can't believe someone would use this platform for something that isn't nice and well-intentioned. I was like, oh wow, people have, you know, different ideas about how to operate in the world than I did, which never crossed my mind as something that might happen.
Yeah, I am surprised yet not surprised about that.
Yeah.
I'm like, with the way that the internet's like, I'm like not surprised, but at the same time, I'm like, really, you sometimes just want to believe in the good in the people, but you can't.
Yeah, exactly. Hasn't happened anymore, so good things that we're like, we manually check people's IDs and do all sorts of other things as well. So
That's
we've
great.
got a great customer service team or customer support team as well that really helps.
So this is something that I feel like a lot of people who are founders of startups or entrepreneurs, they're like, this is the startup grind. You're supposed to be working your ass, spending all your money, lose all your time, basically have no social life. Do you feel like that was the case for you? Do you feel like you're purposely trying to avoid that? It looks like you're at least able to get a walk-in, so that seems good.
Yeah.
So how has it been for you?
No, I really don't, but I really don't believe in that mentality at all. I fell into it at the very beginning quite a lot. I mean, especially when we were working our other jobs as well. It's like, I know it's a really big struggle for a lot of people. And I was working nights and days and like forgetting to eat. And it was a horrible, horrible life. But you know, at some point I realized that at such an early stage, the founder is essentially the startup itself, right? Like, it's really difficult to differentiate that identity from that company because that's all they do. The problem is that eventually people will get burnt out. I mean, I don't really believe that this is a sustainable lifestyle for anyone. And to build a company that's going to last, you're going to have to do it for multiple years at least. And I just realized that it wasn't sustainable for me. I don't think it's sustainable for a lot of people. So putting in boundaries around how you work and how you run your own company, which you're entitled to do however you want, is going to lead to it being more sustainable, and it's going to lead to actually lasting much longer. And then when you hire other employees, is going to lead to having much healthier other employees as well, and a healthier culture that makes people want to stay. It's generally going to create better vibes for everyone, which, you know, will make you not resent the company and will make you want to do that for 2, 3, 5 years, 10 years, however long it is you want to do that for. So then I just essentially started putting in a bunch of boundaries around how I worked, put boundaries around like when I would check my emails and, you know, like how much you get paid or you pay yourself. Like essentially try and invest in yourself as well. I mean, you've got people who are investing in the company, investing in the product, but there's no one investing in you as a person. And so you should really just try and do that because you need it for the company to succeed as well.
That's great. I feel like I've gotten two answers from this. One is that take care of yourself, and the other one is like, no, you got to do it for the sake of the company, or else it's gonna die with you. I could not. I would not. So what is next in your journey? Do you feel like you'll be with Pigeon for a long time, or maybe potential exit opportunity for Pigeon? I don't know what's your goal, if it's to just keep growing or to get acquired or to sell it.
We're taking it day by day. I could envision a future with a successful exit where we get bought out. I could also continue to see it grow. My down the line vision for Pigeon is that we also grow a lot of like verticals for specific industries and businesses. I could see it doing a lot for like medical emergency field and be very closely intertwined with the real estate field and something like that. So yeah, I've got a vision for what Pigeon could be in like 10 years. I've got a vision for what it could be if there's an opportunity for it to get bought out in the next couple of years. Really, we're open to both is what I'll say. Taking it day by day. I mean, yeah, we really enjoy working on it. So not immediately trying to get out. And we've got all sorts of fun things that we're trying to build. So we'll build those and see how it goes from there. On a personal note, or I guess like a larger career note that's not Pigeon related, I think I'm probably going to move out of the country at some point, which is really exciting. I want to do some exploring of new places that I haven't been to and live in other places because I get that need and that itch. Pigeon, we don't know. I always have other careers in the back of my mind that I'm like, oh, I could do that, like ask me again in a couple of years and I might have a better answer for you.
Maybe you could bring Pigeon to other countries.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. People could definitely use it in other countries.
Yeah, that was something that I was curious about because when you're trying to grow your career as a founder, technically you're growing it as the company, but then at a certain point, your career itself is going to be at a standstill because your priority is the company. So what if, let's say you want to do, maybe you want to do more, like get into a certain industry. Like you can't do that if like your company's in a particular industry, or maybe you want to learn a new skill, but you have someone that you hired for that and you can't do everything. So like, I'm always so curious about not controlling, but managing your career versus managing your co-founding slash in this case director of operations job. So that was always interesting for me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because you can't do everything, and at some point managing the company becomes its own job.
Yeah,
where you need to actually manage the employees, and at some point they also might be better at you than you at certain things. Like you could hire like a great marketer and who has like 40 years of marketing experience and you might not have that. So yeah, it's hard. I think essentially being an entrepreneur is its own career and its own journey, and it's whatever the journey of the company is. I don't really know about being like a general entrepreneur as a career, but whatever the company grows is essentially your journey in that moment. Yeah.
So what are your advice, tips, and tricks on navigating and advocating for yourself? So I guess this is like both in your pre-Pigeon life, but also advocating for yourself now that you have a company. Like how would you advocate for yourself?
So at the company, so let's start with pre-Pigeon. Pre-Pigeon, well, I used to give loads of tips and tricks to people. At my last company, I started an employee resource group for people who are early in their careers and women together. And it was a series of like teaching people like tips and tricks for negotiation, like salary negotiation, and a lot of soft skill training that people felt like they needed, and a lot of tips on like how to network and how to like build up what it is that you want to do, the skills you want to do, and decide where you want to go, and then how to advocate for that. How to make your personal and professional goals very clear in like a polite way to your manager, things like that. And there's so many ways you could take that. The biggest lesson that I learned pre-Pigeon was probably that you should establish yearly goals is what I started doing for whatever it is that you want to do. So if you want to build a company, decide what you want that to look like a year from now, and then break that down in systemic, smaller goals in between. And then advocate for that along the way, right? So everything that you're doing, make sure that that is leading towards that ultimate goal in a year's time. A year always felt like a more manageable piece of time, you know, like the big question people ask are like, oh, what do you see yourself doing in 5 years or 10 years? And that to me feels really overwhelming and always felt really overwhelming. But a year is only 2 increments of 6 months, which is really not that bad. So before Pigeon was even a thing that existed, it was like, oh, I would like to move laterally within my company into this other department and also get a promotion within the year. And then everything I did was geared towards that. I made that very apparent to all of my bosses at the time, and I essentially worked with everyone to make sure that I could build that structure and plan in place. That is really helpful. Now that I am with Pigeon, it's changed a little bit. And I think it's become a little bit like more like crunchy or wholesome or whatever, like a little bit more focused on mental health. I'd say I essentially would say surround yourself by people that inspire you is a really good one, and something that I try and do all the time. You know, if the people that I'm around, regardless of what it is that they're doing, if they're not like people that I look to and I am like, ooh, maybe I could do that, or I could push myself to, you know, start another company, or I could break into this field as well, or they're taking like all of these crazy risks in life. They are moving across the world and starting a digital nomad journey, or they are, I don't know, doing a career pivot and going to law school. Like, people who really inspire me really help me push that envelope. And then the other thing within Pigeon is taking the time to realize what makes you happy outside of work. Because so much of my pre-Pigeon time and very early days of Pigeon time was just very career centric, and I've gotten to a point where I am stepping back from that, and you know, I'm realizing that there's lots of other ways that you can achieve growth. It doesn't have to be within your career. You can go start a pottery studio in the Arctic with pigeons and, you know, make beautiful clay vases, and that's fine as long as that makes you happy. And if that's what you want to do, and if that's what's going to make you happy in a year's time, work towards it.
Yeah, that's very inspiring. So it kind of seems like you like to travel. So have you ever thought of becoming like a digital nomad where you just do the same thing as what you're doing, but you're traveling? Or kind of like with the realm of your world, you have to kind of stay in one place?
Yeah. My co-founder actually is going to start a digital nomading trip in a couple of months, and it's very inspirational. I like to travel a lot. I don't know about doing a digital nomad life, just because I am a very deeply extroverted person, and I like the idea. Essentially, I like the idea of doing a digital nomad life if I could spend like 6 months in each place. Like, I like the idea of going to a new place and developing new relationships with people there, getting inspired all over again, you know, deciding to work on this project or another project, and then 6 months later going to another place. I don't think I could do the very short spanned digital nomad life. That just seems quite stressful. Like, where are you going to live? You know, like, who are you going to talk to? There's a lot of logistical issues with that I don't think necessarily jive with me.
Wow, I feel like you just described how like global expansion works. Like each time you go to a new country, you expand
Exactly.
Pigeon there. So I was like, wow, if that could be your exit, like a new role instead of director of operations. I don't know,
Global
VP of global
expander.
expansion.
Yeah, why not? Make the role what it is that you want to be, right? So,
Mhm. So, as a woman in your career, what are some obstacles you face? And one thing that I'm a little bit curious about is that usually female co-founders or founders in general, they do get some criticism. It's like, oh, you're a woman, like what can you do as a founder? Or maybe even investors may have, I hope not, but maybe they have some prejudice. So I'm curious about either pre-Pigeon or during Pigeon, how was that like for you?
mm, um, definitely some criticism from not so much investors. Most of the investors are like, "Oh, you're a woman, great. We can give you money because we need more women-founded companies." So, not so much for the investors. That's a double-edged sword, really. Not so much from the investors. Definitely, judgment on the side from other people, and that was especially when I was working two jobs. I'd get quite a lot of comments about like, oh, how are you going to like develop any romantic relationships if you're working this hard? And I was like, I don't really need to be doing that right now. I'm building a company and that's fine. I just ignored most of those people. Um, that's it is what it is. Pre-Pigeon, also in Pigeon. Um, I've like very much always worked in, and then I studied science. I just have always been in very much male dominated spaces when it comes to education and career. So wasn't that surprised about the criticism and comments that people made. That doesn't really bother me. I just let it like roll off my shoulder. And essentially I just adopt the mentality of like, you don't know anything about me, you don't know what I can do, just leave me alone. And I just keep it going with my day. Um, I do think that on a day-to-day basis, like I very much feel that I have to like speak much louder than other people and repeat myself much more and be much more assertive. I was actually just telling one of my friends this, that at the very beginning phases of Pigeon, I went through a really big moment of like, writing manly emails and like being like, don't put as many exclamation points in there. And now I'm like, really backtracking on that as well, because I found that now they're too aggressive and doesn't really fit my persona anymore. And I was like, now I'm starting to lose myself. So just trying to keep it centered, trying to keep it to what I think matches my identity, and try and make it work for you however you can. Scream if you've got to scream, repeat yourself if you've got to repeat yourself. Eventually people might listen and then you can get things done the way you want them to get done. But yeah, it's a headache, it's hard, it's not easy. Having lots of other women to talk to is really helpful. Having a community is really helpful. Regardless of whether or not they're founders themselves, I think any woman can really relate to another woman who is in a largely male dominated field. So
Yeah, that was always something that when I was talking to, ironically today, I was talking to my friends about this, about like in the past, a lot of women compensated to be like a little bit more masculine. They purposely dressed more masculine. They
yeah.
purposely didn't wear colors or try to flaunt any basically like colorful makeup or express their identity. And then I feel like now we're going to an age where people can do that, where they're comfortable doing that without feeling judged. I mean, there's still going to be judgment from the older traditional
Oh
generations,
God,
but
yeah.
especially in finance, like I feel like they're still traditional to this day. So, I mean, there's a reason why Legally Blonde, the movie, came out. So I always
Great
thought that
movie
was like,
though.
yeah. And I was like, wow, I guess a lot has changed. Like a lot of people don't realize that part of it. They just realize like, oh, oppression from men or white older men specifically.
Yeah.
But like the women from the past have paved the way to make it easier for us to express our identity, express what we want to do. Maybe even just like express your femininity. So I was actually the same way as you, where I was like, how do I make this masculine email? How do I not use so many exclamation marks or ask for validation or keep saying thank you or keep saying sorry? I'm still trying to learn how to stop saying sorry so much for things that I should not be saying sorry for. But that's definitely something that I feel like we have to kind of grow out of or learn new ways to assert our dominance as a woman, not as a man, but as a woman.
Yeah, I agree. And also, like, men need to learn to respond to femininity and not just to aggression. You're like, well, there are other ways that you can hear things in the world. So I'm trying to get them used to that, you know?
Yeah. So I guess to close off, what is on the horizon for you in 2023?
Ooh, I'm gonna do some traveling. I'm gonna work on Pigeon, and I'm gonna take it day by day. That's it. That's what I'm gonna do. Nothing.
It's simple yet not so simple for co-founders.
yeah, exactly. And I'm gonna do some pottery because I really like that, and maybe forage some mushrooms in my morning walks that I do.
How do you actually balance pottery? Is that something you do like on a weekend or weekday nights?
Yeah, weekends, and then one night on the week if I can. And that's just like a really zen space because I can't check my phone and I can't, you know, do anything really other than the pottery because my hands are all dirty. So it's a good way to disconnect from the world for a bit.
And where can we find you on social media? I guess either you or Pigeon.
Yeah, all of the Pigeon stuff is usepigeon.io. Well, the website is usepigeon.io, and then all of the handles are usepigeon. So you can find us all there. And then you can find me on my LinkedIn, email. I can share that information with you, Christine, if you'd like. And yeah, people can always feel free to reach out whenever.
And all those links and social media handles will be in the description down below or in the show notes. And lastly, what can we do to support you?
Oh, that's such a nice thing to ask, Christine. Just, reach out and say hi. We really like to hear from people at Pigeon at any point in time. Check out the website, download the app if you really want. And yeah, just shoot me a note. I like to chit chat with people at any point in time, regardless of whether it's Pigeon or not. If anyone has any questions about the fintech space, operations, whatever, starting a company, also feel free to reach out because I'm very happy to chat about that as well.
Actually, just reminded me of something. So right now it's February. I think by the time of recording, it'll be late February. But let's say May comes around, June comes around. Are you taking interns?
Oh, yes, we will be taking interns.
Perfect.
So reach out of probably various types of interns. So we'll be available.
Okay. I'll definitely, if you have that information available, I'll definitely put that in the show notes and the link in description. Okay.
Yeah, I can send you something.
All right. Well, do you have any last words?
No, this was great. Thanks so much for everything, Christina. It's been very nice to think about it all in like one holistic hour or 45-minute long slot.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, congratulations on getting it done.